Hello, I'm Sarah Muirhead, editor at Feedstuffs. Welcome to this Feedstuffs Fast Chat. Today, we're talking with Ryan Richburg, Assistant Area Live Manager at Wayne Sanderson Farms. Ryan, thank you for joining us here today.
Glad to be here.
Let's jump right into what we're here to discuss, which is how to reduce your reclaim feed and reclaim your profits. So, Ryan, for a company the size of Wayne Sanderson Farms, why is feed reclaim such an important and expensive issue?
Well, you see, reclaim is kind of a necessary evil in some ways in our business. It's one of those things where we're always going to have it. It's something we always are trying to find solutions for. And really where it gets so expensive is in the fact that it's kind of a two-part problem. One, that you have the feed having to go out and pick up the feed on the farms when they get done after catch and anything that's left. The other side of it is that we actually probably should have never sent it in the first place. So we're basically paying for that feed twice. And then, of course, there's potential to lose some efficiencies as far as the quality of the feed, just running it through that many augers, having to go take it. You're going to drop it off at another place, in another facility or another barn, something like that. So it can just, the costs can just keep adding up and adding up.
So walk us through the approach that you and your team took to improve your feed reclaim performance.
So at Wayne Sanderson, one of the big words that we use, a phrase that we use, is something called process focus. You hear it a lot in a lot of our management, a lot of our teams. Everybody has a project they work on. This particular one is one that I was helping some other people work on over the past year. Basically, what we did was we looked at that feed return process and we said, all right, let's break this down into steps and let's just really think through what we're doing at each place and where our weaknesses are, or our opportunities to improve. So the first thing we did was we sat down and we laid all that out and we went very systematically, step by step. This is what happens. This is how you do this particular task. Now, then we look at basically in this case, we discovered that our biggest shortcoming were the actual feed inventories themselves. The way we were collecting them and the way probably most people collect them were not very accurate. Most people in the industry today do one of two things. They either physically climb the bin. They send somebody, up a feed bin to come look inside of the top of it to see and estimate how much feed is in that bin based off their knowledge of the dimensions of that bin. Or in our case, because we didn't want to, from a safety standpoint, send our people that high off the ground without any kind of protectors like that. They would basically rely on banging on the side of the bins with a stick and basically what is the equivalent of a pool cue at the end of it to kind of hear it and figure out where that level is. Well, that's obviously very inaccurate. The other way as well can be inaccurate, and it can also just be more dangerous. So that was kind of where we started. We said, all right, we need to find a better way to do this. And this took, honestly, this is something that we've been looking at for years now, before we heard of, before we thought about using cameras and things like that. We, like I said, of course, we looked at potentially climbing bins and the safety harnesses and all that kind of stuff we would need to invest in. We even hopefully thought we were able to do it with thermal cameras. That didn't work. We tried load cell technology, which is basically, you basically put load cells underneath the feed bin legs to be able to calculate weight, which is one way you can do it. They tend to turn into lighting magnets whenever that happens, in my experience. And then finally, we started really exploring the option with cameras and the ability that cameras gave us to be able to see that feed inside of the bin, and also being able to do that remotely, which was a huge addition to what we did.
So would you say there were any major discoveries or insights that could apply across the poultry industry? What kind of be your recommendation when it comes to that?
Probably the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway that I took from doing this project and really helping through all this is you really need to understand where your costs are coming from in your feed mill, and also what your biggest efficiency gains are from looking at that cost and knowing just basically where everything is hitting you on your bottom line. Of course, the other side of it too is, and we look at it from this standpoint, if we ever invest in a piece of technology or a new process, we want to be able to get a lot of bang for our buck out of that particular product. So, in the case of feed sensors, in the case of our camera systems, we wanted to make sure that we were able to get more than just an inventory out of it. We wanted to be able to say, all right, there are other ways that we can speed up our process. Are there other ways and other efficiencies that we can find from that? And we're hoping to use that technology also in the future to look at helping us with like bird weight projection, which is something go hand in hand. You're being able to project your bird weights at the end of a flock based off of that number, and being able to track flock performances in real time. It's something that a lot of us in the industry have just never had the ability to do, just because no one's going out there and physically taking an inventory, once a day, that sort of thing, especially not, multiple times a day. So that there's a lot of efficiencies to gain there. There's a lot of ways that we can improve in other ways in that as well.
So then what role can bin monitoring technology play in improving feed reclaim and just overall operating efficiency?
I think probably the biggest, and obviously we can improve feed reclaim, feed return, things like that. So that on the front end is great. But some other things that we have really started to think through is, can we really change the way that our feed mills operate? Like today, in some regards, a lot of feed mills are operating in a very reactive state. So they're basically relying on delayed inventories, maybe once a week or at some given time. And they're basically having to make decisions based off of that. Where we're able to be able to get a real world kind of check the pulse of where our grow out is. We can look at everything. So, all right, where do we need to put feed? And then what we can do is we can start to change the way we approach our feed bins in the field at the farms. No longer are we confined just to the storage at our feed mill, but we're actually able to look at those feed bins as basically a place to store inventory. So we can start to build up inventories, start to plan ahead. When you start doing that, you can really start to look days ahead of schedule of where we currently are, and start to plan, the logistics from a driving standpoint, from your driver hour to your DOT. You can also look and plan your manufacturing more efficiently, so you can schedule more downtime. See, my mill in particular is we're open 7 days a week, and we're manufacturing feed all the time. Some places are 5 days, and you'd be able to kind of plan those things out a little bit more and be able to do that. And then on top of all that, kind of in today's climate, one of the big things we saw is that you're able to do all those things and potentially reduce the personnel it takes to do that. So you can really start to kind of harness the power of your more higher performing employees, really give them responsibilities over the bigger systems and logistics, and they can really get a lot more out of just having to give people kind of more medial tasks and things like that. So that's probably the beauty of the whole thing. And that's where a lot of savings come in, is just looking long term at your personnel and becoming more efficient overall as an operation.
Yeah, it really gives you that overall view and just brings it all together for you, it sounds like. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan, for this Feedstuffs Fast Chat.